Hi, I'm Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Tree Guard Paint, and today we're going to be talking about pruning your citrus. And this here is a cocktail grapefruit. And this tree is a standard size grapefruit tree. And the goal here is the roots have actually reached its capacity in regards to the plant height. And when this plant actually reaches that critical stage where the roots can only support so many branches and so many fruit and so many leaves, it's really important to actually start cutting back and pruning the tree. And we're talking about marginally. The question everybody asks is, when do I prune my citrus trees? And the best answer is typically after you harvest your fruits, and if you harvest your fruits just before it actually goes into flower production. So that's sometimes a tricky point. Most fruit trees, and there's a lot of citrus in this garden, they're actually fruiting, flowering, and carrying fruits year round, and it's very difficult to actually find that right time. But there's something that is happening to all the citrus trees, and especially when they reach maturity, is when there's actually dead wood. And when there's dead wood, then the time is now. You always want to remove dead wood from the tree because it'll always improve the health of your citrus. And here are some examples if you want to follow me over here.
Yeah.
So take a look at all of the dead branches that are up here in the tree. And what we're going to do is actually cut it back to the first point where we see some life. And in this instance, we're going to cut it back to here. So I've just removed this dead branch. Sure, there's a few leaves in here, but you can see that this wood is 99% dead. The tree's going to be far better off with that removed. And we've just cut the branch to this point, and we're now feeding this branch, which actually has some fruit at the end of it. We're going to continue removing these dead branches, and you're going to want to cut as close as you can to the, see, here's some more. You can see that I'm cutting as close as I can to the tree branch. That way the branch can actually heal over on the points that I've actually cut. These should not be stubs. Instead, they should be as flat as possible so that the tree bark, when it expands, can heal over those wounds. Another important consideration would be to actually put some Ivy Organics Tree Guard paint over it. That'll help keep any insects or wood-boring insects from getting into those wounds as well. Anyways, a Eureka lemon tree. This here is a semi-dwarf or a semi-standard tree. On average, it'll grow between 8 to about 12 or 13 feet. And this plant was installed about 2 years ago. When I installed it, it was about 2 to 3 feet tall, and now as you can see, I'm 6 feet tall. And had I not been pruning the tips, it would easily reach 8+ feet. And this is after 2 years of growth. And take a look here. Last year, it produced about a dozen fruit, and as you can see here, here's the next year round of fruits, and as you can see, it's blooming. And the Eureka lemon is characterized by its new growth. When it comes out, it's actually a purplish, brownish color that when it matures turns into the green leaves. So this here is a Eureka lemon tree. And when it comes to pruning your trees, as we saw with the mature standard size, that was a cocktail grapefruit that we saw at the beginning, the plant had outgrown its capacity for the amount of roots that it has. So you want to make sure that you remove all of the dead wood, and that's another time to prune. Another time to prune is if the tree's just getting out of control, too high. And I've been periodically every 2 to 3 months coming out and actually pruning the tips that are actually getting too tall. And in this instance, I'm actually going to reach, for a stem over here, and I'm actually going to come down to one of its lower leaves and bring it down. I'm just going to cut about a 1/4 inch. I'm actually going to do another one here for demonstration if you want to zoom in to see how I prune this. I'm basically going to come down to whatever agreed length I want to come down to. I'm actually just going to prune right above the leaf and cut it at an angle. And the reason for cutting at an angle is when it actually gets wet, you want the water to fall off the cutting and not actually sit and rot on top of that point. So another reason, aside from removing deadwood, is control height. Another time you'd actually prune your citrus is if it's actually growing and you're trying to manage it from growing into a space you're trying to protect. So in this instance, it's actually overgrowing under a patio, but it hasn't done so by much. I've actually been cutting branches periodically. I'll take out this branch as it's now reaching out into the patio, and I'll bring this back to this point over here. And again, I've pruned it about a 1/4 inch away from that stem, and it's come out to another bunch of leaves and actually a ton of flowers I just discovered ready to fruit that corner as well. So we'll just drop that there. I want to point out another thing on all of these trees here in our garden. we've actually got them all coated with this product called Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Tree Guard Paint. And it reads here, it's a natural tree, trunk, and branch barrier protection against damaging sunburn, insects, and rodents. And what we do is we coat these trees at least once a year and no more than twice a year. And we basically coat it, and right now it's actually in the shade, but some of these trees, as we go through the garden, you'll see are actually exposed to too much sunlight, and citrus are famous for actually cracking and burning with too much exposure to the sun, and especially when being pruned and allowing too much light in. The goal when pruning your tree is actually just to open it and to make sure each branch is getting a maximum amount of light so it can support the maximum amount of fruit. Another thing to do when shaping your plants is you can use these weights. You'll actually read something about using weights on your fruit tree to control the branches. Eureka lemons are famous for actually producing vigorous, tall growth. And instead of pruning, some people actually use weights to actually bend and control and shape your plants. And I just got a case of water for a few dollars and added a hook, which I took off a Christmas ornament, and tied it onto a piece of string. And now I've got a weight that, if I just attach here to the tip of the plant and wrap it, you can see I can actually bend the branch down. This is another way to control the plant from actually putting all of its growth going straight up to now bringing the plant to actually grow more bushy and lower. So this is another technique that could be used for actually controlling the shape of your plant. Let's take a look at another tree over here. This plant over here is my standard size Meyer lemon tree. This is a sweet lemon. It's a cross between a mandarin and a lemon, hence the sweeter lemon variety. And you can see again, it's loaded. Last year it produced about a dozen, and this year it should have several dozen lemons on just this one tree alone. You can see it's growing and it's fruiting, and up here you can actually zoom in and take a look at all the flowers that it's also producing with all of these little fruit as well. And if you take a look down below, you'll actually see again this trunk is coated with the Ivy Organics, and this is color white. It also comes in brown and green as options as well, depending on what your preference is. Here's another one of the Meyer lemon varieties. This here is just producing a lot of growth over here. No fruits on this branch, but you can see over here a lot of fruit, some buds for the next flower production. There's hundreds of flowers that are coming out, and here we are now going into June. And another thing that we can do aside from pruning is actually shaping. We use the water bottle for a weight. Another thing we can do is actually stake it and tie the branches back. This again is growing out over the patio, and I've got this empty space over here that I want to fill up with lemons as well. And what I can do is I just put this bamboo stake in the ground to save some time for this video, and always make sure you put your knot on the stake and not on your tree, otherwise it'll constrict the flow of juices and sugars in your plant. So you want to make sure you actually tie your knot onto the stake, and then we're just going to wrap it around one of the branches and pull the branch back, and we'll just tie that onto the stake. We'll cut off the excess string, and then there we go. Now we've got this branch that'll be growing, filling in this empty space and producing more flowers and more fruit for us to enjoy in the years to come. Let's take a look at another citrus tree. Follow me. So here we are next to our OroBlanco grapefruit variety. When it comes to grapefruits, the OroBlanco is a white grapefruit, one seed to no seeds. This variety, and actually grapefruits in general, have been named because they actually form fruits that are actually in clusters. And let me show you the fruits over here. There's a lot of fruit here on the back side of the tree. If you take a look right here, and here we are again in the month of June, you can see they're coming in clusters of 4, and there's a few other places on the tree where they're growing in clusters. But another thing you're going to want to do is, if a landscaper actually came in, I'm using this as an example, come a little closer actually over here, take a look at this branch. If you take a look in here, you'll see there's some deadwood over here. So any deadwood, make sure you prune it as close as you can to the stem of the tree. So we're going to cut that off, and that again will heal itself and close up. Another thing you'd want to correct, and I don't really want to prune this plant, but I'm going to use this for demonstration purposes. If your landscaper came into your garden and left a tip like this onto your plant, where there's all of this energy that's going into a space where there's no leaves, no fruit, no anything, you're going to want to actually prune the branch to the next lowest stem, next lowest leaves. You want the juices, the waters, the sugars, and everything to flow into something that's actually life-giving. And this is just a stub that's actually going to ultimately end up in dead wood. So we're actually going to prune it so that the flow of energy goes into this branch. So that's another tip. So, and the last thing I want to share over here, and here we are next to our bear's lime, and this is actually was installed about a year ago. You can see here is our first fruit. Right next to it is some more flowers that are ready to come. But this again was installed less than a year ago. More flowers actually all coming all around. But another tip you want to look for, and the goal is we want to make sure that the plant produces as much fruit, and the only way it's going to produce the heaviest yields is to make sure all of the leaves are getting the maximum amount of light. And what I'm seeing over here is actually some branches that are crossing each other. And when the two branches cross one another, they're actually competing for light. One branch is going to basically constrict and shade the lower branches from the helicopter flying up overhead. So let me show you over here. So if you take a look at this branch over here, this branch is crossing over this lower branch over here, and I've decided, and you've got to make these decisions as well in your own garden, but I'm actually going to remove this branch, and I'm pruning it as close as I can to this stem to basically open these two branches so that, again, the maximum amount of light is getting into both of those branches, and none of the branches are actually shading one another. So whenever there's crossing of branches between the trees, make sure you prune those off, and you can recycle that into your compost garden. Anyways, I hope you found this video informative. To quickly recap, if there's any deadwood on your citrus tree, make sure you remove it. If there's any crossing branches, as we did over here, make sure you remove one of those crossing branches, or you can use one of those techniques that we discussed, where you put in a stake and actually pull the branches apart and grow them in the desired direction. Another important consideration is to remove any undesired growth. If it's growing in the wrong direction, if it's blocking a pathway, if it's growing too tall. Those are all instances where you can actually prune right now to control the desired shape. And the last thing is if there's any exposed wood, just as we did on the OroBlanco tree, if there's an exposed stub or any dead limbs that are on the plant, you're going to want to remove those, as those are entranceways for wood-destroying organisms such as termites and beetles to get into the citrus tree and start destroying the living tissues within. And I hope you found this video informative. If so, be sure to like it, and most importantly, subscribe down below so you can join this Ivy Organics class and be tuned into all of the educational gardening videos that we have already provided and all the educational videos that we're putting out on average once a month. Again, thanks for watching and happy gardening.